Hello, Happy New Year. Welcome to the Nutmeg, the Evening Standard's weekly video show discussing the big talking points from the Premier League. I'm Dan Kilpatrick. I'm joined as ever by Jack Rosser, Simon Collins and James Robson. There's only one place to start this week with Chelsea, who slipped to a 3-1 defeat at home to Manchester City yesterday to increase the pressure on boss Frank Lampard. It's the Blues' fourth defeat in 6 matches, and they're in danger of being cut adrift in the race for the Champions League places. James, you were there. First of all, the pressure's on Lampard. What's the situation with him at the club as it stands, as far as you're aware?
Well, look, I think it's understandable that on the run they're on, that people start talking about his future. And I think he understands that as well. You know, he answered the questions last night when he was asked about it, and he knows they're going to come when Chelsea are currently in the form that they're in. He's been there long enough. He's seen enough managers come and go. He's seen the greatest managers in the world sacked, and sacked for doing not much worse than doing better than he's doing, frankly, right now. So questions have to be asked about him. As things stand, I don't think anything's imminent. I don't think anything needs to be imminent, but he's got to be worried. There's no doubt about it. With the money he's spent, I don't think when you look at it and you say, well, they're only 3 points off the top 4, so it's not that bad. And to be honest, he's even mentioned that they're not too far adrift. But since when was top 4 good enough for Roman Abramovich? You know, people win trophies and get sacked by Abramovich. So I really don't think top 4 is the marker we should be looking at.
Well, that's it. Roy Keane warned on Sky Sports after the game that sacking managers is in Chelsea's DNA. Lampard now statistically the worst of Roman Abramovich's managers in terms of points per game. There's obviously an emotional connection between Chelsea and Lampard. How much will that play on Abramovich's mind? Is he a cold, ruthless ruler? Or will Lampard's history buy him time that, say, AVB never got?
Well, I think that is the problem, and this is why it's so hard to try to second guess what Roman Abramovich is thinking. Frankly, everything Chelsea do comes down to his whims. You know, if he's not happy with something, it changes, and that's it. You know, it's a bit like what's the old saying? If you want to make God laugh, then make a plan. It's that kind of thing. Lampard's talking about planning for the future. Well, all good and well, that can mean nothing, dependent on how Roman Abramovich wakes up in the morning. I don't think that being a club legend is going to do him any favours if he doesn't win the title or doesn't win the Champions League, really now, it's looking like, I think. Jose Mourinho is the greatest manager in the club's history. He sacked him twice. Roberto Di Matteo was not as much a legend as Lampard, but a legend, won the Champions League, got sacked before the year was out. You know, him being a legend, I think, counts for absolutely nothing. It would only count with the fans, I would say. I don't think it would make any difference to Abramovich. If you're talking about having any sort of sentimentality, maybe that came in giving him the job in the first place. That's probably where it ends.
You mentioned the fans there, but I suppose being popular as a manager at Chelsea is important, as we saw with Sarri and perhaps Benitez. Do you think the presence of some top managers on the market makes Lampard's situation even more tricky? We know that Abramovich is probably only going to appoint either a club legend or a bona fide European top-class manager like Allegri, like Thomas Tuchel, who are both now out of work. Does that increase the pressure on Lampard?
Well, I don't think it helps. I think that's for sure. And I would look at someone like Allegri and think he has been hanging around for a long time now. We know that he's learned English. He really wants to come to the Premier League. London is also very appealing for him, and Arsenal is very appealing for him as well. So it's not just Chelsea. But I don't know that necessarily adds to the pressure for Lampard, because if you think about it, there weren't really any top managers available when Sarri got the sack, and he still got the sack, and they went for Lampard, didn't they? You know, I don't really think that comes into Abramovich's thinking. You know, when it's time to get rid, he gets rid and he brings in whoever else is available. Generally, there's always one of these big names kicking around, isn't there?
Jack, just come to you now. Chelsea's transfer business, they spent over 200 million in the summer, has come under a lot of scrutiny. New signings, Timo Werner, Kai Havertz, Hakim Ziyech. they've blown hot and cold really, and none of them have been really consistent. Thiago Silva's looked the best of the bunch so far. He looked like he'd transformed the back line, but now Chelsea are really shipping goals again. Is this just kind of natural teething pains in the Premier League, especially for the younger players, or have Chelsea had a dud summer in the transfer market, the equivalent of Spurs signing the Magnificent Seven in 2013?
I think it's probably too soon to call it a dud. There are going to be teething problems always. I think the problem is, there were teething problems to a lesser extent when Lampard brought so many kids into the side last season and had to get them settled and understanding what they need. When you're bringing in so many players from abroad that haven't played in the Premier League before, there's going to be a problem there. It took Christian Pulisic a while to get going. He had a steady start to last season, and then I covered the game at Burnley where he scored a hat-trick and then went on a fantastic run before getting injured again. So you're always waiting for a moment like that, really. The peculiar thing with some of Chelsea signings is that Werner started well and scored a few goals and set a few up, and then has just completely gone off the boil. Havertz, they've been unlucky in that he's sort of taken longer to recover from COVID than many other players in the Premier League have, and Ziyech has had his injury problems as well. So there are a lot of mitigating factors really with the new signings, but the money they spent on the players, it's natural to expect a quicker return, and natural to expect Lampard to be able to help them settle quicker.
Simon, I think it's pretty clear that this is a season like no other, and we've all been saying that and writing that for some time, but I think it's only really starting to sink in that almost every club is going to go through these peaks and troughs. And having covered Arsenal this year and their horrendous slump in winter, and which they now look like they're coming out of with a good period of form, can you see reasons why Chelsea should be patient with Lampard? I mean, Arteta's shown that a young manager can turn it around and can get results when it looks like the dressing room is seemingly kind of slipping from his grasp.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that the fixtures are so congested and the schedule is so congested means that you can turn things around pretty quickly. I mean, Arsenal we'll come on to later on, but the fact they had 3 wins in 8 days and suddenly the picture is completely different. So I think for Lampard, he will know that if he gets sort of 3 or 4 wins in a row, suddenly the mood changes. And a month ago we were on here debating whether they were title challengers or not. So it can change very quickly. I think the troubles that Lampard have had and Chelsea have had, I think they did spend a lot of money, and I think we'd probably all agree when that happened in the summer, everyone thought these were fantastic signings, but there needs to be, in my opinion, an understanding it's going to take time for these players to bed in. It's not just one player who's added to the attack. It's sort of 3 players trying to come in and change it. And on the schedule, the amount of training time these teams are having now, particularly with teams like Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham, playing twice a week, Europe, then they play on the weekend. The actual time you get to sort of work on the training ground and mould these players is pretty small. So I think it's going to take time for Lampard and Chelsea. The issue he's got is you don't normally get time at Chelsea. But the hope for him will be, if January can be different, you can put some wins together, the mood will change quickly, and it will change quicker than it would do in a normal season.
I think, as Simon said then, we're not talking about a normal club here. So it's all good and well to say, yes, he deserves time. Yes, there's lots of mitigating factors regarding new signings and settling in, all that sort of stuff. And we'd all agree with that, because for any other club, if you're building for the long term, building for the future, you'd say, well, we've put our faith in this man. We've given him money. Let's let him build. But this is Chelsea, and that doesn't happen at Chelsea. So, Abramovich didn't show patience with Carlo Ancelotti for daring not to win the double in his second season in charge. This is a different club. And when we talk about with other clubs, like with Arteta, he wins 3 games on the trot and the whole picture's different. And you think, yes, maybe now you can see what Arsenal were looking at and what he's building. I don't see 3 wins on the trot changing things for Lampard, because 3 wins on the trot, what does that do? Well, it moves them up the table. Chelsea managers are judged on winning the title or the Champions League. And if you don't win one of them, you generally get the sack.
I think that the one thing that might come in is defence, is the relationship he's got with Petr Cech and Marina Graskava as well. We're not really sure what his relationship is like with Abramovich, but you'd imagine it's quite a good one from his playing days, and the pressure will change now, of course. But the last two permanent Chelsea managers have been at loggerheads with the board and the recruitment side, and it now seems that Lampard, all the stories that come out after they sign a player is that it was Cech and Lampard working on it together, Lampard putting calls in, Cech recommending players, and Marina, pulling off some pretty impressive deals. So I think that sort of unity is something that Chelsea haven't had for a while, and will be something in Lampard's favour as well.
James, just as a final word on this, I totally accept there's no comparing Frank Lampard's sterling work at Derby with Pep Guardiola's achievements at Barcelona. But do you see any comparisons between this season for Lampard and Pep's first at City, bearing in mind this is, of course, Lampard's second season at Chelsea, but it has been suggested that there are some comparisons to be made there?
Well, it's been suggested by Lampard that there's comparisons to be made there. And I think you just made the point there. This isn't his first season. It's his second season. So I know it's his first season of signing players, but it's his second season. If Guardiola had gone 2 years without winning anything, without winning the title at City, maybe he wouldn't have lasted there either. But I think the big difference is that Guardiola went to City because City basically sold him this dream of, we're going to build the club around you, it's going to be in your image. Basically, they were going to make City to him what Barcelona were to Johan Cruyff. Now, I don't think Chelsea are doing that with Lampard. Yes, he's been able to bring through players in a way that no other manager has, but that circumstance, that's not necessarily a case of them buying into his vision. It's a case of, we couldn't buy any players. So, what do we do? And I also think when you look at the signings in the summer, on the one hand, you could look at it and say they've really backed him and they've given him this glittering array of talent, and they have. But they bought players that any manager in world football will be happy to take on. So they're not contingent on the manager. They're not Frank Lampard players. It's not Frank Lampard. Kai Havertz is a particularly Frank Lampard player. He's a world-class player that every top club in the world wanted last summer. So any manager coming in will happily take those on. It's not a case of, these don't fit in with his vision. So again, that doesn't bode well for Lampard.
Let's move on to Arsenal, who, as Simon said, made it 3 wins in a week with a 4-0 victory over West Brom on Saturday. Perhaps Sam Allardyce is regretting saying the Gunners were fellow relegation candidates. Simon, is the crisis officially over?
I don't know if you can say it's officially over, particularly when it's Arsenal. But the clouds, I think, over the Emirates have certainly cleared. And I think when our last nutmeg, when we were speaking, probably just before sort of that run up of Christmas fixtures they had, I didn't think we would be in this position here where they'd gone 3 wins on the bounce, particularly kicking off that run of games with Chelsea. But it has completely changed, the confidence of everyone at the club. I think Arteta, just looks so much happier. He doesn't look as drained as he was before. Even on the touchlines, he never really stopped his cajoling of the players, but he seems even more back to his expressive self, particularly in lockdown when we can, hear everything he's saying. And I think the confidence was summed up on Saturday with that Kieran Tierney goal. 2 weeks ago, the idea of Arsenal scoring a goal like that, where, the players turned inside out and the ball hit in the top corner by the left back with his wrong foot, is not something you'd imagine, but it's the confidence they've got now where they're taking those things on. So this Arsenal squad has always been, even under the days of Wenger and Emery, a squad which has fragile confidence, which can peak and trough. And when it's high, they're great. And when it's low, it's not. But I think right now we're seeing how the confidence is back in the group, and Arteta's feeling the benefit of it.
Our Evening Standard columnist, Alan Smith, and yourself have really been championing Arsenal's young players and saying that Arteta should put his faith in youth. You seemingly done that in the last week or so with Saka, Smith Rowe, Martinelli, all coming to the fore. There's lots of reasons for optimism, isn't there, looking at that core of youth in Arteta's squad?
Yeah, and I think it almost got forced upon Arteta when those changes happened in that Chelsea game, because obviously there was the issue with, Willian and Luiz both being ill. So the changes had to be made. Aubameyang was still coming back from a calf issue. So he sort of had to, put Smith Rowe in, Martinelli and Saka. But they all repaid the faith in him. And I think what it did as well for supporters was, you'll know, covering Tottenham, Dan, having a player who's come from the academy and, you know, putting forward that effort and that commitment to the cause, it's instantly easy for fans to get behind that. And I think they saw that with Smith Rowe in particular, you know, on that Chelsea game. I don't think he had a fantastic game against Chelsea. He was pretty neat and tidy, but his work rate and his movement was just so much greater than had been seen from players previously that fans got on board with it. And then against West Brom, you know, that second goal, I think Ian Wright on Match of the Day was, you know, absolutely praising it and saying this is the football that Arsenal's all about. And Arteta said the same. And it all came from, you know, Saka, Smith Rowe linking up. And that's what's giving Arsenal fans hope now. And it's what should give Arteta hope, because the whole idea around him was his ability to, you know, coach players, make them better like he did at Man City. And he can coach these young players and make them better players.
Yeah, I certainly see comparisons with what's happening at Arsenal with what happened at Spurs and Pochettino's first season, where he had a lot of senior players who were underperforming on big salaries, you know, the likes of Adebayor, Yunus Kabul, perhaps roughly equivalent to kind of Willian, the way he's playing. And Pochettino eventually, after kind of a slow and difficult start, put his faith in the likes of Ryan Mason, Harry Kane, of course, Andros Townsend, Nabil Bentaleb, and with these young players who were really kind of buying into his philosophy and the way he wanted to play, Spurs quickly turned a corner. You can see something comparable at Arsenal now, and they've managed to get the best seemingly out of Alexander Lacazette, who's now, I think, statistically enjoying his best season in England already. So how has he turned his season around, or how has Arteta turned his season around, Simon?
Yeah, I mean, Lacazette, he spoke a bit about it post-match, just the sort of enthusiasm and the competition the young players are bringing. I think that's been one of the benefits, not talked about as much, but these young players performing has put pressure on senior players to up their game. And I think against Chelsea, we saw that with Xhaka, and against West Brom, we saw it with Lacazette. But the thing that he's benefiting from tactically is just having this movement around him. I think people will know with Lacazette, he's not really that striker who's going to run in behind and be chasing balls over the top. He's better with the back to goal and bringing other players in and then finding space in the box. And sometimes some of his best goals was a bit like the one at Brighton, where he doesn't actually move. He just has that knack of strikers just standing still and the ball comes to him and he finishes it. And I think he's really thriving off having these young players full of energy, full of movement, who are pulling the defenders around. And he's just taking the chances that come to him. So it's an interesting situation with Lacazette, because we're now going to probably see him lead the line for the next 6 months or so. I think he's ahead of Nketiah, and he's got 18 months to run his contract. And Arteta said, we'll decide it in the summer. I think if you'd said to any Arsenal fan a month ago, what would you do with Lacazette? They would say, get rid of him. But if he has a brilliant 6 months, what do you do? Did you keep him for a bit longer? So that'll be an interesting one to watch, I think, going forward.
And is there a genuine case for dropping Aubameyang? Is he becoming almost the elephant in the room of Arsenal's revival?
It's a difficult one, because I was thinking about this sort of post-match and how, you know, about a month ago where they were going through this sticky patch, I sort of thought the way for Arteta to get out of it would basically do what he did last season, where, you know, you went 3-4-3, solid formation, and we're going to win games by getting the ball to Aubameyang. He'll be the difference maker. You know, he did it in the cup semi-final, he did it in the final. But actually, the way the team has sort of developed, and perhaps the most interesting thing about this run of 3 games, is that Aubameyang hasn't scored or really been involved, and the team have done it without him, which is a good thing in a sense, because it shows they're not so reliant on him. And Arteta has stressed all the time, we can't be reliant on Aubameyang. But it does beg the question, you know, will there come a point where the team moves away from him? I don't think we're there yet. I still think, particularly if he plays out on the left, he should be in the side. But he's now got Martinelli absolutely chomping at his heels. And against West Brom, you could see Aubameyang was desperate to score. I mean, particularly towards the end, it just wasn't really dropping for him, but he was trying so hard to get himself on the score sheet and get himself that rut of form. But there will be questions asked about him. But for right now, I think you've got to stick with him, because his track record is just too good.
Jack, let's talk about Bukayo Saka. He's really difficult not to love, and he's playing so well at the moment. I think he's looking like a good bet to be in the England squad as the reserve left-back behind Ben Chilwell as it stands, or left wing-back. But he's making a real case for inclusion, I think, as a forward as well. And obviously his versatility is a plus. How impressed have you been by him? And looking ahead to the Euros, what kind of role would you potentially see him playing in Southgate's squad?
He's been fantastic, hasn't he? I think when he came in for his England debut. It was 12 months or just over 12 months since he sort of came on the scene for Arsenal, and it's such a rapid growth that I remember asking Southgate about Saka a couple of months after he emerged at Arsenal, and it sort of got, laughed off. It was like, all right, we'll maybe leave that one for a few years. But the way he's come in and settled and impressed when he's played for England as well has been fantastic. I think, not just back up to Ben Chilwell, especially if we're going to stick with the three at the back with Southgate. He's a serious contender because he looks so positive whenever he's come on for England, gets forward, causes trouble. I think on his debut at Wembley, it took him a bit of time to settle and get going. But once he sort of worked out that he could compete internationally, then there's no real fear in the way he plays. And when we've struggled for creativity with a few of the games last year now, this season with England, to have that sort of option at left wing back, one that can run at players and beat them either side is really valuable.
Let's move on to West Ham now, who won 1-0 at Everton on Friday night. They're now unbeaten in 3 games since Christmas and having a really encouraging season under David Moyes. James, I'm going to come to you first. The perception of managers this season has been a big talking point. I think mainly because Marcelo Bielsa's come to the Premier League and attracted a lot of attention for the way his Leeds side are playing. He's seen as a manager with a philosophy that he sticks to, that is the right way of playing it, if you like. Whereas managers like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer have perhaps been unduly criticised in the past. Obviously, United doing very well now. In terms of David Moyes, you would have covered him when he was at Manchester United. Do you think he's getting enough credit for the job he's doing at West Ham? And do you think his reputation or perception of him, if you like, will always kind of precede him?
He's got that problem at the moment because there is no getting away from what a disaster it was at United. That was his first big shot, and it was was supposed to be the making of him, and it obviously didn't turn out that way. And he's had a pretty rough spell since then. So it has been a long road back for him. But you can't forget what the qualities that got him the United job in the first place. He did an absolutely amazing job at Everton, and that is often overlooked because he's just became a bit of a figure of ridicule. And that's not fair, but that's what happened. The first time when West Ham let him go, that really wasn't fair. That was because you looked at it and you just thought, this is because he's not fashionable enough for you, and really they would have been better if they'd kept him, most probably. So I think that it's still going to take a while for that to go completely, definitely. But we are seeing at West Ham that he is a manager that, if given time, if given the opportunity to build, which is what he does, because he's a bit of a slow burner, if you like, but he puts the fundamentals in place. And when that gets going, when you get a proper David Moyes team, you see what West Ham are seeing. They're a very difficult team to beat. And we're seeing that now. And I'm very happy for him because I think it's been pretty cruel on him the way his career has gone. He thought that move to United was going to be the making of him. I know quite a bit about him. He had these visions of being a 2-time Champions League winner, and that was long before United even came coming, because he's very much a forward planner. One of these people who he views the future, and he sets these life goals and that sort of thing. For instance, the day that it broke that he was getting the boot at United, he was actually in the middle of putting together a presentation that he was going to take to America to show the Glazers, and then he heard on the news that he was getting the sack, and it went. He's a very positive thinker, and he very much trusts in his own abilities. And I don't think that ever went, but he wouldn't be human if he hadn't been shaken by the events that have happened over the last 7 years or so.
Well, that's interesting. But I suppose if you're going to imagine the future, why imagine yourself as a 2-time Champions League winner when you could just envisage yourself winning it 5 times or 10?
He's realistic as well. This isn't just pie in the sky.
Fair enough. Moyes famous for saying once at United that they needed to improve at defending, passing and creating chances. But Jack, what's been the key to West Ham's revival this season?
They've improved at defending, passing and creating chances, I think. He's managed to... There's a few, like James is saying, he's a big planner, and he sort of sets things out early on how he wants to do things. He did it when he was at West Ham the first time. He used to speak about creating a profile for what a West Ham player should be, what they should be going to sign. and he's been given the chance to bring that in now. They're no longer signing Simone Zazas or even, people like Felipe Anderson, Sebastian Haller as well as some hangovers that he's been dealt with. They're going for players that fit what Moyes wants to do, and he's put in an ethos, he's put in a work ethic and a plan, and players are seeing that working and they're responding to it. He said after the Everton win, and you can tell he knows he's doing a good job, because he's getting a bit bullish is maybe the wrong word, but he's getting more confident again in what he's doing. He sort of said that, he directly said that if the players aren't going to come along with his plan, they'll get left behind, and that's proof that he knows what he's doing. And players are jumping on board with his plan and are going ahead with it. And if they're not, they're getting cast aside, just like Anderson did. He was sent on loan to Porto, where he's not been too successful. But Moyes has got everyone going in the same direction, and especially with Antonio coming back now, it's starting to work.
Declan Rice and Thomas Souček were brilliant again at Goodison Park. How good a pairing are they? I mean, where would you rank them in terms of the Premier League overall?
Quite well, very high. As a duo, there are a few that are better in terms of what they do. Rice, it continues to improve. He's always sort of had the understanding and the vision to be in the right place at the right time and cut things out. Something that, they carry on being interested in him. Chelsea just didn't have that foresight last night or yesterday afternoon in dealing with Man City. They didn't have someone there to press at the right time, to cut things out at the right time. And he does a lot of the work that allows Souček to get forward and cause mayhem, basically. They cover so much ground as a pairing. It wasn't until a few weeks ago that Souček had covered the most distance of any West Ham player in every game of the season. I think Fornals beat him one game a few weeks ago, but he covers so much ground. He's been described as the new Fellaini, but he's a bit more than that. He's got a lot of awareness of what he's doing in midfield and getting West Ham on the front foot. And then, like I said, he just causes chaos when he gets into the box as well. He's so big and knows where to run as well to cause problems. They're a fantastic pairing and cover so many bases for just two players.
The whole top 10 of the Premier League is so condensed at the moment, and West Ham are just 3 points off Spurs in fourth. What's realistic for them this season? I know Moyes has spoken of Europe.
Yeah, it seems hard to pin something on it because it can change so quickly. Europe would obviously be fantastic, but Europe is what has been promised by Sullivan and Goal for years. They spoke about getting into the Champions League, and maybe that's why they got Moyes on, because they think he sees him winning it. But it's Moyes is another thing that Moyes has been talking about is sort of under-promising and over-delivering. He sort of wants to stop the culture at West Ham of promising all these things. So I think the main target for the rest of the season is not to waste what they've built. So many times West Ham will get in a good position and shoot themselves in the foot. They'll beat a Man United and lose to Burnley. And the key is to build that platform and use it and not waste it. And then you can look at getting into Europe in seasons coming forward. Obviously, there's a great chance to sneak into Europe, and if they can keep everyone fit, they could certainly do it. But I think top 10 consistency, albeit a bit boring, would be quite an achievement for West Ham after the last few years.
We've got this kind of odd dichotomy now of Moyes under-promising in the media, but imagining himself as a two-time Champions League winner in his head. Simon, I'll just come to you for the final word. I mean, from the outside, kind of looking in, do you think Moyes is kind of shedding West Ham's reputation as flaky? I mean, do you think the perception of them from elsewhere in the Premier League has changed or is very close to changing?
Yeah, I think it is changing, and I think they're becoming what you expect from a Moyes team. And James touched on there about the work he did at Everton in the time there. I remember that Everton team was just, for sort of over a decade, such a reliable team, and you knew exactly what it was from a Moyes team. They're incredibly efficient, attacking players who thrived under him. Arteta, one of those Cahill players like that. And I look at this Moyes team, and so often I feel like with West Ham, they, particularly at that time where they were, Jack was saying, signed the likes of Felipe Anderson, Sebastian Haller, Simone Zaza, who were just players who were so hot and cold, very sort of flavour of the month. They weren't really players for the long term and to sustain us a decent season. And I think now they've actually got the basis of that. And I think the key for me going forward is just letting Moyes take control of it and put his vision on the club, because, you know, players like Soucek, like Kufal, these are solid players who fit that Moyes mould. And I think the best thing that West Ham can do now is just say to Moyes, look, we saw what you did at Everton. We know you can build a club and be sustainable and keep us on an even keel, which West Ham would love. You show us what the vision is and we'll follow you.
Yeah. Let's move on to Spurs. There's not a great deal more to say, I think, about Mourinho's style, which has been done to death, but they were certainly a bit more enterprising and less passive in a 3-0 win over Leeds on Saturday. They didn't sit back and try and defend a 1-0 lead as they did in the frustrating draws at Palace and Wolves in December. So perhaps a corner turn there, and they're back in the top 4 and just 4 points behind Liverpool now, who have been held to a couple of frustrating draws just when it looked like they were about to pull away at the top of the table. Given United's resurgence and the way City played at Chelsea and the way Leicester are kind of ticking along, it does look like this season we could see, you know, genuine title race involving a few clubs, given it's been, you know, a 1 or 2 horse race in the last couple of seasons. James, we touched on it earlier, but given the fact that everyone looks likely to go through peaks and troughs this year, do you think we're going to see something like that? You know, a real fight between 3, possibly 4 or 5 clubs until near the end, or do you see it that a City or a Liverpool or perhaps both will inevitably pull away as we get to the business end of the season?
Yeah, for me, I think I agree. You know, there are going to be ups and downs in a way that we haven't seen in recent years when Liverpool or City have just been unplayable. But I think it's telling that Liverpool are still top, despite all of that. You know, they're still top, and that has got to be the thing that would worry the chasing pack. I'm still not convinced by United. I think they've got another slippery spell under them. Watching City yesterday, they look pretty ominous, I would say. So I'd still expect them and Liverpool to be right up there. Well, what I do think, though, is that it's going to come down to the managers, you know, and this is kind of going back to the whole Chelsea thing. You know, I look at Lampard's squad and I think it's better than Mourinho's. So what's the difference? The difference is Mourinho. And you think, well, Mourinho might be able to plot this and make the most of this in a way that Lampard can't or isn't. And maybe in a way that Solskjaer can't as well. So, yeah, I certainly... Yeah, the way Tottenham play worries me, and I do still wonder if that can win a title. But I also think that Mourinho is the one to maybe come from the pack to challenge Liverpool and City.
Yeah, we've touched on it on here before, but it does feel like Jose Mourinho is kind of made for football in a pandemic season. And I think even though Spurs were so underwhelming at the end of last year, I think there's something quite comforting in the fact that they're not being quite as erratic as, say, United or Arsenal or Chelsea have been. They're even their sort of bad spells are quite dull, and their good spells are also quite dull. I mean, the biggest issue for Spurs at the moment is the over-reliance on Harry Kane and Heung-min Son. I think they've scored something like 22 of Spurs' 28 league goals. I think only Ndombele has scored more than one from elsewhere in the squad. So Spurs need to get their other players firing in the final third, and Mourinho has picked out Steven Bergwijn and said that he could be a player, or he is a player who needs to start scoring soon, and obviously missed a couple against Leeds and a couple of big chances in the defeat at Anfield as well. Just to pop back to the title race, Jack, I mean, how do you see it shaping up? I mean, do you agree with James that the other side should be concerned that Liverpool are still top, despite, I think, obviously being, you know, way below the ridiculous levels they set last season?
Yeah, I think it's telling, isn't it, that all of this talk of, you know, injury crises at Liverpool and things like that, and then there's a few results where they just go and blow away teams and sort of send out a bit of a reminder. They're still there to be pulled in, but I think it will be in games. I think Spurs have got them again fairly soon. It'll be in games like that where they need to be kept in check. You can't rely on other teams to pin them back too often, which is, you know, part of the course in that sort of title race. There will be more of a title race, I think, but I think maybe the more exciting or interesting bit will come around the, you know, 4th spot and the other European places with teams like West Ham, Southampton, all in the mix around there. Aston Villa, Southampton could also play a big title race this evening, of course, and further on. But we'll see how it goes. But it is a concern that despite all this talk of Klopp in crisis and losing all the players, that they are still top and looking rather comfortable.
All right, well done for crowbarring Southampton into the conversation there. I think on that note, we'll leave it. Thanks for watching for this week. Please remember to engage with us on social media, like, share, comment, ask us questions that we can tackle next week. And we'll see you then. Thanks for watching.